caught in the crossfire. The country's president has accused the United States of financing the warlords as part of Washington's global war on terror. Now there are fears the country is descending into a proxy war.
The Americans are not admitting this, but it is a widespread and rumor that warlords go to Nairobi, neighboring Kenya, and come back with a lot of US dollars cash to distribute among their fighters. And on the other side, there is no word who is funding the Sharia courts. Some people believe that they have links outside Somalia, and people in other parts of the world are funding them as well.
Somalia has not had an effective national authority since President Barre was ousted in 1991, leaving warlords to carve the country into fiefdoms. The United States sent Marines into Mogadishu in 1992, the vanguard of a UN peacekeeping operation. But after 18 soldiers were killed and 2 helicopters shot down, the US pulled out. Islamic fundamentalists stepped into the vacuum. They promised to bring stability, but have also been accused of links to Al-Qaeda. The escalation in violence prompted an emergency resolution at the United Nations Security Council, urging all countries not to break the existing arms embargo to Somalia. It also called on Kofi Annan to re-establish a monitoring group to investigate violators. An earlier vote, though, rejected calls for targeted sanctions and a tighter arms embargo. Michael Voss, BBC News.
Families exiled from the Chagos Islands by the British more than 30 years ago have finally won their legal battle for the right to return. The families say they were forced out of the Indian Ocean islands so the United States could build a major airbase on Diego Garcia. The British High Court has now ruled the islanders are entitled to return.
An epic struggle is nearing its end. After a legal campaign lasting nearly 4 decades, the Chagos Islanders have won the right to return to their homeland. The judges ruled as illegal the British government's eviction of the islanders back in the 1960s.
We are very, very happy to hear what the judge had said and give us the right to return back to our motherland.
At the height of the Cold War, the remote Indian Ocean atoll of Diego Garcia and the Chagos Islands were cleared of their inhabitants by the British government to make way for a strategic American base. The islanders were removed to Mauritius and the Seychelles. Some were compensated, but most survived on the edge of poverty. 6 years ago, the High Court in London declared their removal to be illegal, but the government blocked their return. Even this victory is not final. If the British government decides to appeal, or if the United States decides to give priority to Diego Garcia and global strategy over the claims of some 2,000 islanders. Jim Fish, BBC News.
And still to come here on BBC World, Tamil Tigers attack a Sri Lankan naval vessel. Mediators say it's a gross violation of the ceasefire. OK, let's get all the business news now from New York, and Tanya Beckett is there.
Catty, thanks very much. Bolivia says it won't pay off foreign oil companies after nationalisation, and the markets have their second worst day of the year on Wall Street. The numbers for that just ahead. Bolivia's President Evo Morales says foreign oil companies will not be compensated for oil and gas resources that have been nationalised. Bolivia's new left-wing leader was speaking at a trade summit in Vienna between Latin America and Europe. Mr. Morales also said the Brazilian company Petrobras was operating in what he called an illegal manner in Bolivia. Investors are concerned about what this may mean for the wider picture.
Take the example of Venezuela in the middle of 2005. Hugo Chavez went first after the energy companies by looking to restructure their royalty and licensing agreements. He then went after the mining companies. He then went after the agribusiness companies. All of those companies suffered. 2 large major oil companies left Venezuela after all was said and done.
Arcelor is taking a legal swipe at the company trying to take it over, Mittal Steel. Arcelor filed a patent lawsuit here in the United States saying Mittal had used some of its technology without permission. Mittal says the lawsuit is groundless And a surge for metals, precious and not so precious. Once again in New York, gold closed at $721.50 an ounce. That's up $15.80, and that's the highest level since September 1980. Silver rose above $15 an ounce for the first time since January 1981. Among the base metals, aluminium, zinc, nickel and copper all hit records. Traders say prices are soaring because demand is high and speculators are moving in on the market. Talking of the markets, let's turn to Wall Street, where we saw a dip, worries about inflation and the oil price. The Dow Jones and the Nasdaq ended the day weaker, and European markets also took a bit of a dip.
This is BBC World News. A quick look at the main headlines again. A report on the London bombings has concluded Britain's intelligence service needs beefing up. And President Bush, under pressure over the monitoring of terrorist activity in the US, denies anything illegal.
Violence is increasing in Sri Lanka with another serious clash between the Tamil Tiger rebels and government forces. This time it was at sea. The rebels attacked government naval forces in what seems to have been a fierce battle. The Sri Lankan government says at least 17 sailors are missing. A troop transport travelling from northern Jaffna came under attack from what had been called suicide vessels. Well, the BBC's Dimitha Luthra is in Colombo. She told me the ceasefire monitors, some of whom were on board the boats under attack, are very angry.
What they've said is that this is a gross violation of the ceasefire. They've put the blame entirely on the Tamil Tiger rebels. They've called this reckless behaviour that could seriously jeopardise any chance in the future for peace talks. They've also asked the government to show restraint and not be provoked by these actions.
The monitors, I see, are also calling on the government not to be provoked, to show as much restraint as possible. It is a bold attack, though, isn't it? Can anyone really talk about a ceasefire still being in place?
Well, the International Truth Monitors actually said it feels like we're monitoring a war rather than a ceasefire. I mean, officially, either side has to give 2 weeks' notice before it withdraws. But given the current situation, given the almost daily violations and the escalating violence, it's very difficult to say how relevant the ceasefire is at the moment.
Dimitha Luthra in Colombo there. Nepal's new government has released 2 prominent Maoist rebels who've been in jail for 2 years on murder charges. One of them, Atrika Yadav, is known as the highest-ranking rebel leader to have been imprisoned. His colleague Suresh Ali Maga is a member of the Maoist Central Committee. Human rights groups say there are over 1,000 Maoists in jail. The rebels have called for their release, saying this would create a positive atmosphere ahead of the planned peace talks.
There have been clashes in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, between protesters and riot police. Thousands of officers have been deployed to prevent demonstrations by supporters of 2 senior judges who spoke out against fraud in last year's elections. The judges, who've been accused of damaging the reputation of the judiciary, refused to enter the court when members of their defence team were prevented from entering. Well, the BBC's Ian Pannell in Cairo told us which groups were involved and what their demands are.
Well, what they say is that they're out on the streets to support the judges, that they want the judges, the charges against the judges to be dropped and to allow people to speak openly. The groups involved are essentially the Muslim Brotherhood, the most powerful group, the largest opposition group in Egypt, banned but tolerated by the government, Kafaya, who are the people pushing for democratic change, and then there are other left-wing groups as well. So curious coalition of people who've been pushing out on the streets for change. They were met by opposition from the security forces who refused to let them anywhere near. One said, not under the Bible, not under the Torah, not under the Quran will I let you pass. And this led to some of the anger and confusion that you saw on the streets today.
The BBC's Ian Pannell reporting from Cairo. And still to come on this programme, Dr. Zhivago makes it onto the small screen in Russia for the very first time.